My name is Caroline Rubio, and I'm one of the counselors here. I have the students with the last names I through N and students in the AVID program. I'm also AP coordinator, AVID coordinator. I'm a member of WACAC and NACAC, which is the Western Association of College Admissions Counselors, the National Association of College Admissions Counselors. But most importantly, I'm also the mom of a senior. So that's been a whole different spin on the college admissions process for me personally, and that's kind of what I hope to share with you today. Is I've been saying a lot of stuff through my 24 years of being a school counselor, but now as a mom, it's like oh, I never thought about that part of it. I never thought about that part of it. So it really, hopefully, will help you. So let's get going here. So my philosophy is it's not just about getting in, it's really about finding the right fit, because high-performing kids can often get into a lot of really great schools. But if you haven't done the research to figure out what that really great school is all about and how you might fit in, that might not necessarily be such a great thing. So we're really going to talk about kind of the process of how to go about doing all of this so that you're going to be a happy camper when you go to pay that big amount of money after high school to pay for college. So, big thing, careful planning and research are really going to help you with all of that. So just briefly, for our younger kids, I know our older students have probably come to the parent nights and they've heard this a million times, but maybe middle school students aren't as aware of the college systems. But there are several college systems within California, and we're also going to talk about outside of California too. But the California State University system has 23 campuses. Some of them range from as small as 350 kids at the Maritime Academy to really, really big, like San Diego State University. So, and they have a variety of different options at different campuses. They're all very, very different from each other. And they're designed to serve the top third of the students within the state. Our local campuses are East Bay, which used to be called Cal State Hayward, and San Francisco State University. So for students living in this local area, those would be the campuses that you would have priority admission to. University of California has 10 campuses, and they serve the top 8th of the students in California. We also have California community colleges. They're spread all over the state. And then we have, of course, private schools, technical vocational schools, and then we're going to talk a little bit about outside of California schools as well. What we're discovering here at Dublin High is that a lot of our kids are starting to look outside of California for college, for many different reasons that we'll talk about in just a little bit. So I think it's important to just keep a broad view of what your options are in order to be happy as you finish off senior year. Okay, you've got a handy book I know that they gave to you in your packet, and actually this is a pretty good book. I was looking at it before, after I did all my PowerPoint. I'm like, hey, they've got good points in here. So this actually is really worth reading and taking a look at. But the biggest thing I would tell you about college admissions is it's about GPA. GPA is super, super important for all schools. Now that's not to say that you have to go crazy taking 80 million AP and honors courses. I think the point of that is that doing well in the classes that you choose is really, really important. Some kids are really strong in math and science. They don't love the English and history so much. That's okay. Challenge yourself with those classes. Other kids are more humanities-based kids, and the math and science thing just isn't their thing. That's okay. Just recognizing where your strengths are and challenging yourself within those areas. You will go to college even if you don't take 6 APs as a senior. Really, it's true. So I think the whole thing is being smart about your decisions of courses that you make and doing well. And also thinking about, what am I doing outside of school? Maybe you have a job, maybe you do sports, maybe you volunteer, maybe you're a club officer. You know, high school kids ideally have a lot of things going. And that's what college is like. It isn't just about the person who gets the 4.0 who has no life. It's about the person who's a well-rounded person, who's feeling good about themselves, who feels like they're contributing to their community, who's energized and excited about life. That's what they're looking for. So having that kind of balance is really important for kids. Okay, so also, I'm sure, I know you guys are CSF kids, so I don't have to say this, but I just thought I'd throw it in. If there are any kids with D's or F's, Very important that that gets fixed right away, because even one D in a college required course will not get you in. So let's say the illustration I always give to our 8th graders when I go to the middle schools is, even if you have A's in every class, but you got a D in freshman year English is a requirement for college admission. So you need to fix that, because that one D will keep you out of college. But I'm sure, actually, this is not the right audience to say that to. But nonetheless, you guys are great sources of information for your friends. And so sharing this with your friends who may not be as high performing is really going to do them a good service, because what we don't want is for kids to end up in senior year going, oh, why didn't I go to summer school? Why didn't I choose to work just a little bit harder? So make sure your friends know that too. Okay, other essentials are college admissions tests, and they're highlighted in here as well. But what I really advise students to do is take the PSAT, that is affiliated with College Board. So PSAT is like the SAT. The plan is like the ACT. I encourage all my kids to take both measures. Sometimes students will discover they have a real strength in one type of testing, not so much in another. And so it's important to figure out who you are as a student. Some kids do really well in both, and that's great. But some kids, it is a pretty obvious difference when you start getting back those PSAT or plan results and saying, this particular test is my strength, and this is the one that I can really emphasize and work towards. Okay, so having an opportunity to take these types of tests throughout high school then prepares you for when you really start to take these tests for real, generally in the spring of junior year, and you can also take these tests in senior year as well, usually through November, sometimes through December, depends upon each individual school. Okay, one thing that you need to know about is something called superscoring. Okay, this is kind of a sort of a detailed sort of thing, but essentially many schools will allow you, let's say you take 2 different settings of the SAT. On one measure you do on one time, let's say the May one, you do really well on critical reading. On the June one, you do really well on the math one. They'll allow you to mix and match between 2 different sittings. That's why we encourage kids to take multiple sittings of these tests, because a lot of schools superscore, including private schools. Okay, what they won't do is mix and match between SAT and ACT. But they will do the same thing with ACT. You know, maybe you do really well on the math section here, maybe you do better on the reading section on the other one. That's awesome. Take them all. Some schools will use single best sitting, like University of California. And I know this is very, very detailed. So my point being, please take these tests a number of times, and take them in spring of junior year so that you have a number of tests that you can really utilize. And that way you're not going to be really stressed out. And if you don't love your scores, you know, in all honesty, I know we talk a lot about test prep and we talk a lot about test strategy, particularly with regard to the SAT, because the SAT is more strategy based than the ACT. The ACT test, what do you know? It's pretty clear. It isn't like they're trying to fool you. SAT, there is a whole different strategy level, but what I like to tell students is you can study to these tests. And when you get back your scores, if you look at them, you're going to see, okay, I'm really strong in algebra, maybe not so strong in geometry, maybe I need to do some study in geometry. For instance, on the ACT, they have a section on science. And kids will tell you who've taken the plan, who've taken the ACT, it has nothing to do with science, it has to do with graph interpretation. If you don't know that going in, your score won't be as high. But what you can do is buy some test prep books, really work those books. And I'll tell you, in my daughter's case, because I mentioned she is a senior, we didn't have her study for the first few times she took it. The last time she took it, we had her study for it. She went back to her geometry teacher going, you know, I took geometry a long time ago. I don't remember some of this stuff. She worked that. She went to work with the science department on the graph interpretation part, and the difference in the score made a $12,000 difference for financial aid. So it's really big. So, and some people aren't great test takers. I understand that. That's why you want to make sure that your GPA and your pattern of coursework is really strong. Because college is really, remember, that's the number one, that's most under your control. If you're not a great test taker, okay, but the other thing is You cannot rely upon the test to get you into schools if the GPA isn't strong. So what you do on a daily basis is most important. Okay? Sorry, I know it sounds like a lot of lecture, but I'm telling it to you straight because I want you guys to get into great schools. Okay, so next one. Starting all of this early. You're probably going to get tired of the Caroline Rubio story, but I'm going to tell it because I think it illustrates the point. My children are unfortunately saddled with me as a school counselor who really loves college admissions, and my husband's a history teacher. So when we go on vacation, we see the historical sites, and oh my gosh, we also get to visit the college campus around us. And they're like, oh, this is just too much. But I will tell you, my two older kids, I've got a sophomore also, they already have a pretty clear idea of the kind of school they want to go to, because they've seen a whole lot of schools, not even necessarily with the idea that they might want to go there. For instance, in October we went out to Tennessee and we saw two schools out there. One was the University of Tennessee at Knoxville, the other one was Murfreesboro State University in Murfreesboro. And I was excited about Murfreesboro because we actually own a property in Franklin. I mean, the kids could commute, it's going to be great. And we arrived there, didn't love it. Went to Knoxville. My son is on fire to go to UT. Well, he loves football, but the whole piece is that vibrancy of a huge university where everyone's very high performing. That's his thing. What a great thing to discover as a sophomore, you know, because now I know he is shooting for the best possible grades. This totally influenced what he wanted to take as a junior. So now he's challenging him with honors and AP courses in areas where he hadn't necessarily thought about that. But he has looked on that UT website, he knows what they expect, and it's not me pushing him, it's him pushing himself, because he knows if I want to go to this school, I have to work hard. These are the kind of grades I need to get, these are the classes I need to take, and these are the scores I need. That's awesome. And so knowing that stuff early on in high school is really, really helpful for you, because it helps set a certain bar for whatever it is that you want to do. Okay, school culture. This can be really, really different school to school, and this is why you need to go and visit. Sometimes you might have this idea that a particular university is really terrific, like their reputation is wonderful. One illustration that I love to use is Berkeley. I've taken many, many students to Berkeley, and uniformly prior to the visit, the expectation is they're going to love Berkeley, because Berkeley is great. Berkeley has a great reputation. Berkeley has all these Nobel laureates. Berkeley, we all know about Berkeley. And when we get there, and after the visit, you might ask them, say, how did you feel about the campus? Half of them will say, you know what, I really love the vibrancy. I really felt like this was a great fit. I really, like, people are smart. I felt like all these programs were going to be great for me. And half of them go, it's way too big. I felt it was impersonal. And there's no right or wrong answer, and that is the one thing you need to know. Your friend may love UCLA, and you may get on that campus and go, this just doesn't connect for me at all. That's okay. That's why this process is really an individualized process. It isn't about what your friends want or the reputation of the school. It's about what fits for you and how you feel when you're there. Okay? So, speaking with college admissions personnel, critical questions to ask. I would say that my kids ask very different questions than I ask as a parent. What I ask as a parent is, can my student graduate in 4 years? Are they going to get housing? What's the housing availability? What kind of things are going to come up if they want to change their major? Do they have internships? Do they have study abroad? What kind of opportunity, what in ways will you support my child? Because I'm thinking as a parent, the kids are looking at a whole different kind of things, like, well, what do you have to take for a certain major? They might say, what's the food like in the cafeteria? Well, I had one student tell me the way he was picking his school was if you like the food or not. As I said, people are different, you know? What you're looking for is different. Everyone's going to have their own set of lists of what's important to them. So as students, that's what you need to start thinking about, is what's important to me as a student. What are things that I can live with, and what are things that I cannot live with? What are, you know, so there's going to be some variability. It's really probably hard to find, like, you've got 20 things and you're going to meet all 20. Probably not. But what are the most important things? That's what you need to start thinking about. Also, speaking with students, Tour guides are paid to tell you that what a shining example their school is and why it is perfect. And actually, sometimes that doesn't actually happen. I've been on a couple tours where the kids have said stuff where I'm like, oh my gosh, if they only knew in the admissions office that these people were saying this stuff, they would get fired. But, wow. Okay, so the other piece of advice is don't let the tour guide be the barometer of whether a school is good for you. Because sometimes they have really not such great tour guides, and sometimes they're awesome. So the tour guide is one piece of it. The admissions offer is one piece of it. But I always ask kids when I go on campus, can you get your classes? Because for me, that's really big. And kids will tell you the truth. If you're going to particular schools where that's a priority, they're going to tell you that. If they'll, and I actually keep in touch with a lot of my former students, and they might say, well, you know, like at Berkeley, I have a student at Berkeley who's actually a recruited athlete at Berkeley, and I'm expecting they're going to really take care of the athletes at Berkeley. The student said, well, I got my first 12 credits and I got the classes I wanted, but for the other 3 credits, I took a class that I'm really not interested in, but I needed 3 more credits, and that's kind of good to know. So she's actually taking Slavic cultures and literature. Not something she expected, but actually she kind of likes it. So in some ways, it kind of opens up other opportunities. But, so I think the list of what the parent questions are and the list of what the kid questions are often different, but what I would say is generally what kids mostly go to look at is the other kids. They look to see what the kids are like. And that's really big for them. Okay, collegeconfidential.com. When I was helping my daughter with this whole process, this is a website that I really kind of liked. And I created an account because students will write about their schools and parents will write about the school visits. And I liked hearing both sides. And sometimes, and this isn't really sanctioned by the school, it's just like a website that has sprung up with all the college admission stuff. And it's, sometimes you can get a pretty good insight into what a school culture is like. For instance, my daughter applied to a school that was her pick, it wasn't my pick. And on the school website, the student had written that our school has a reputation of being a school with really snotty rich kids, and I'm proud to say that that's accurate. Okay, well, not so good from the parent perspective. So that kind of, and actually in talking with some people, it ended up that is sort of the perception of the school. You know, and as I said, it's all personal opinion. But you do get kind of a feel sometimes for the schools based upon this, because this is a sort of not school-sponsored sort of thing. Also, trying out the cafeteria, seeing more than the food. I always drag my kids to the cafeteria at a school they're considering going to. But what we're really looking for is not just do they like the food, because the food is one thing, but how are the kids sitting? I was recently at a school where there were kids sitting alone, or maybe in groups of 2. No one was really talking. There didn't seem to be much sense of community. And for my daughter, the sense of community was her #1 thing she was looking for. And she saw that, and it was like I don't think so. And the school has a very good reputation. It is a good school. But it isn't just about reputation, it's really about fit. Okay? Okay. Factors to consider, they have some in that book, just running through really quickly. These are things that kids might want to think about. Rural, suburban, urban, the size of the school, the breadth of the majors, availability of classes. For me, that was really big. Kids don't think about that so much until, you know, that's a parent conversation about, do I really want to pay for that 5th year of school because my kid can't get the classes? Okay, so cost, that can be big too. Religious affiliation. I've had some kids for whom that's really super important. For other kids, not at all. So that is one thing to consider. And then the activities. Do they provide a lot of activities for the students who attend? Is there an active sense on the part of the school that they want to develop this campus community? For the Cal States, for instance, now they have really been working towards requiring freshmen to live on campus to create a greater sense of community, because it's really been in the past regarded as a commuter system. Okay, so they're looking at student retention in a very different way, because oftentimes if kids aren't engaged, they're not going to want to stay there. Okay, also one thing important for me, maybe not so on target for the kids is, are the classes taught by professors? Okay, so for some of the bigger universities, not necessarily. They might be taught by graduate students. So I wanted, for my daughter, classes to be taught by professors. Also, class size was important to me, and the graduate school admission rate, if it's pretty good, they're going to advertise it on their website. If it's not very good, you won't see it. Now, there are a lot of school websites that don't have that, but if it's particularly good, it's going to be all over the place, because that really means they're doing a great job of preparing kids to go into graduate education after their bachelor's degree. So those are some things that I look at. Also, is housing available? What kind of housing guarantees does the school offer? Because especially in areas like, let's say, San Diego County, it can be very expensive and hard to get housing. So this is very critical. If you're going to a campus that, like, let's say Humboldt State, that's up in Arcata, you're going to not probably have so much trouble with housing up there. But I'm thinking more of the urban kinds of schools. For instance, San Jose State University has added on to its housing. But if you want to get your own apartment in San Jose because you don't want to commute from the Bay Area, it could be kind of tough. So these are important questions to ask, because it isn't just about getting in and getting there the first couple of years, but what happens when you're a junior and a senior? Are you going to be able to live in the local area? Also, ability to change majors. Some schools are very restrictive about that. And the ones that most come to mind in my mind are the Cal Polys. So Cal Poly Pomona and San Luis Obispo require students to declare a major when they apply, and it can be very difficult to change even from one type of engineering to another type of engineering. So these are things you're going to want to ask, because some schools are restrictive with that. A lot of them are not necessarily. The one thing I want to tell students is you don't want to do this thing of saying, okay, this school is challenging to get into, so I'm going to say I'm going to be an art history major, but what I really want is chemical engineering, and I'm going to kind of do this backdoor thing and get in. It doesn't work that way, especially for engineering and for nursing. Okay, if you want to be an engineer, if you want to be a nurse, you need to say so up front, because they have differential standards for admission to those programs, and it is really important that you put down really what you want to study for that. For some schools, it's fine to go in undeclared. In fact, Harvard will not let you declare a major, because they say, how does an 18-year-old know what they want to do with their life? I actually really like that philosophy. But for some schools, particularly where there is a very distinct set of criteria where you need to get in, like engineering, from the very start, you have to have that physics, the multivariable calculus, all that kind of stuff. They need to know it up front. So it is important to declare the major. But if you want to change, you need to make sure that it's, your school is open to doing that. Also, taking a look at your student's performance, and if your student is likely to be accepted. And we're going to talk about that in a moment. Also, many schools have honors programs. It's important to ask about study abroad opportunities. Increasingly, employers appreciate the opportunity for students to study abroad. The international business, living in another culture, being exposed to things other than American things, that is very marketable. Plus, to be frank, I think it's really important, growing as a person. And let's face it, once we start getting a job, I'm not sailing off to France anytime soon. You're kind of in the job. So this is your chance as a student to really have an exciting learning experience. So ask about study abroad at your schools. And also internships. Internships can be huge. So I think that's another thing super important for kids to ask about, is availability of internships, or if they don't do internships per se. Let's say you're talking about University of San Francisco. Their philosophy is get the kids out in the fields even in the first semester of college. Because what if you're a nursing student and you discover you don't like dealing with blood or urine? Not so good. Better to discover that early on. So these are the kind of things that you want to think about. What opportunities are you as a school going to give to me to get in the field? Because some schools oftentimes will do all the general ed stuff in the first 2 years. Then you get into the coursework for your major. And if you have no experience dealing in the world of business, or in being in the classroom if you want to be a teacher, or being in a hospital if you want to be a nurse, that can be oh, I don't necessarily like this. So that is something you might really want to look at and ask about, how can I get in the field early on? A lot of schools are increasingly adding that into how they built their four-year plan for you. Okay, single biggest mistake for college admissions. Sometimes hearing a school is highly rated or difficult to get into or expensive sometimes skews the idea that this is a really good school for you. As a point of example, I had a student at the beginning of this year whose parent called me and said, well, we hear Columbia University and NYU and Claremont McKenna are really good schools, and so we're going to have our student apply. And the student was nowhere close to the average admitted student profile. So because the reputation of the school was good, or the aunt or uncle felt that this was highly rated, that constituted a good reason to apply to the school, and it isn't. What you need to do is to look at your own individual performance, your own test scores, and then really make a determined decision whether particular schools are a good fit or not. And also, not applying to realistic school choices, not doing the research prior to senior year. So that's the big message here, is start doing the stuff early, because you will be so much less stressed. So this is what you should be doing: visiting campuses, getting a sense for what is comfortable for you as a student, having a frank discussion with your family about what is reasonably affordable for you. Okay, for our family, that was a big part of the whole college application process, because I have 3 kids. And I can't do for one kid what I'm not going to do for my other kids. And so the whole financial piece was really, really big. And sometimes what I'll hear is that students will get to senior year and there's never been a discussion with their parents about how much money do I have saved, do you expect me to work, how many loans can I take out, what is my parent comfortable with in terms of loan assumption? Because sometimes they're not. And then that puts a whole different spin on things. So really having that conversation early with your folks is a good idea. Okay, researching different schools. Okay, now the profiles we're going to talk about in a minute. But profiles are generally up on most schools' websites about this is the average admitted student. Okay, so this is where you can start looking at, is this a school good for me or not? Another resource that I like to use is the U.S. News and World Report. I kind of generally don't really care about the rankings thing because it's a little bit skewed. The rankings for this are based upon schools are more highly ranked if they're more selective. So what schools are doing now is, you'll see as you approach senior year, all of a sudden you're going to get all these emails saying, we would love for you to apply to our school. And they're not sent to you in particular. What you agree to generally, and you probably don't even think about it when you take the SAT or ACT, is you agree to have your information shared with other educational opportunities or whatever. Okay, so they don't actually send your score. They release your information in a particular score range to a lot of different campuses, right? So what colleges are doing is they're sending out invitations to apply for free, which actually we took advantage of for 3 of the 11 schools that my daughter applied to, because why not? It's free, right? But what the reason behind that is that they're hoping to get a lot of kids they can reject, so they become some more selective. Okay? So that's why the rankings thing, don't take it too seriously. Okay? The reason I'm saying this book is a great resource is it gives average GPA, average range of SAT and ACT scores, it lists all the majors, it lists about how much financial aid and people get and all that. So I like it because it's current and up to date. I always buy the most recent edition. So that one's really good. The school websites will probably give you more detailed information than that. And the other thing I would tell you is, especially for high-performing kids, don't knock out expensive schools right away. Because some schools have what I call merit-based aid. There's 2 types of financial aid. One is need-based aid, that depends upon your family's income. The other kind is merit-based aid, depending upon your student performance. And that's a combination of your standardized test scores and your GPA. So some really hard to get into schools actually don't have a lot of merit-based aid because everybody who gets in is a 4.0 plus. So that is one thing to know, okay? Because sometimes they'll say, oh, so it's inexpensive to go to these Ivy League schools. Not necessarily. It kind of depends upon the school. So don't assume because a school is hard to get into, they're going to have all kinds of money for high-performing students because all the kids are high-performing. So that's just something to be advised about. Okay, so I want to just talk briefly. I printed up some school profiles, which I thought would be helpful for you, from many different schools. One is Westminster College in Utah, and I like this one because, boy, is this comprehensive. It gives you average GPA, average SAT, average ACT. It gives you the class rank information, if people come from public or private schools, and about the financial aid piece. So this is probably the most comprehensive one I've seen on a college website. But this is the kind of thing I'm talking about students looking for. And that is one really big critical piece about this whole process, is this should be student driven. Because you as a parent don't want to be in a position of taking ownership for the student's college search. Because what will happen is, if a student doesn't get in, or if a student gets into a school that you picked that they had no ownership about, then, and if they're not happy, guess whose fault it's going to be, right? It's going to be mom and dad's fault. So, and this is really something that kids should be doing, because it's your college search. It's your 4 years of college. It's your time to really pick a school that's a great fit. So please work with your parents. I mean, I absolutely worked with my daughter. She and I did this as a partnership. So I'm not saying parents shouldn't be involved. I'm just saying parents shouldn't do this for the student, because there might be some unhappy campers at the end of the road, or maybe not, but anyway. Okay, Redlands, another good school. Gives you some basic information, you know, average GPA is a 3.56, how many kids enrolled, and so forth. And I like this one as well. There's some that are more detailed, but MIT. We have students at Dublin High getting into MIT, so I thought that would be fun to bring up. Okay, we see only 10% of the students who applied got admitted. The thing to keep in perspective is students who apply to MIT are high-performing students. It isn't the garden variety middle performer. So 10% of the high-performing students were admitted. And that's how you need to frame this, is that you need to look at kind of who is applying and what kind of student are they as you go through the process. And I did Claremont McKenna colleges. Also, that's a private California college system in Southern California. They have several different campuses. They accept 16% of the students, but take a look at those critical reading, math, and writing ranges. Okay, this is for high-performing kids. And the other ones I thought you might think were kind of fun were UCLA and UC Berkeley. These are the 2009 admission statistics. So what I'm hoping is that you come to our parent and student nights in the fall, especially as you get to be older in high school. You might be going into junior or senior year. The high school counselors at Dublin High routinely go to the Cal State and UC conferences. We will have current admission statistics, because what I can tell you is, what I'm seeing with my seniors this year, there are higher expectations even than these present statistics for this year's admitted class. And I'm actually kind of blown away by the number of Dublin High kids who've gotten into Berkeley and UCLA, which are the two toughest campuses. It's like, wow. I mean, that's pretty unusual. So we're doing a great job with the kids are doing a great job, so I'm really pleased. But what I always tell kids is, you can expect that these were from a couple years ago, so just keep that in mind as you think about the different schools you think you might want to go to. Okay, what we try to communicate to all of our seniors is applying broadly to a variety of suitable institutions that you have researched. Okay, and this process really should start probably in junior year, is a research process. What I had my daughter do was, she got to pick 20 schools, and she could pick any 20, but I wanted her to write down her GPA, her SAT, her ACT scores, and so forth. Then I also wanted her to write the cost of the school, and what she had to research on the financial aid pages was, do they give merit aid? Because for our family, that was really important. Because we really needed some, you know, good money there, right? Because a lot of schools she was looking at were expensive. Okay, then for each of the schools, she put down their average SAT, their average GPA, their average financial aid package. So these were things that she went through herself, and it became really pretty crystal clear. There were some schools that she thought she originally was interested in, not so much. And other schools maybe she hadn't really thought about that now looked a whole lot better. So this was done in junior year, in spring. So by the end of junior year, she already knew where she was applying as a senior. And boy, you want to talk about stress reduction, that was great. Because she went into senior going, okay, I know these 10 schools I'm going to apply to. Actually, some of the ones on her list of 20 I had suggested for her because yes, I did. We collaborated on it, but yes, I'm kind of a badinsky about that sort of stuff because it's my thing. So anyway, in senior year, she already knew where she was going to apply to, and there wasn't a whole lot of stress. It was just then dealing with the applications and making sure that, do we need some more testing? Yes, it was a good idea, and sure enough, because of all the studying I told you about, things changed a whole lot in terms of financial aid for that. So this is kind of the strategy that you want to use, is starting this stuff earlier on. Okay, you can start, actually I think it's great for freshmen and sophomores to start thinking about the colleges they might want to go to. But I'm saying researching this in a defined and method, just having a method in junior year, so you're done by the end of junior year, so you know what you're doing in senior year, so you don't have to do all this research then. That's going to make your life a whole lot easier. Okay? So, you want 1 or 2 reach schools. Have several pretty sure, because you've researched this. You know what are reasonable schools to apply to. And then a couple, yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm going to get into these. So that you have a sense of comfort. You don't want to do this thing where you're going, okay, I'm only going to apply to the University of California. That may not be a great strategy, because what if all of a sudden the GPA expectations or the standardized testing expectations change for that system, which is entirely likely. It's getting more competitive. So having a broad range of schools, in-state, out-of-state, public, private, that's what you want to do. So you have a wide set of options, not just locking yourself into one. And again, prior research, you can probably get sick of me saying this, but really, this is going to make life so much easier. And it should be student driven. Okay, so what some families have done, I talked to a couple seniors this year, and they said, my mom and dad and I sat down, and they said, we will spend $1,000 on the college application fees, and if you are not taking these tests in senior year, it's about $10 a shot to send your score reports. So it does cost you some money with that. And then also thinking about visiting. Okay, so some kids had a budget, and that seemed to work well for them, because if they had to stay within the budget, then their strategy for applying was going to be sort of different than this unlimited budget, this kind of, that probably wouldn't work too well. Okay, for our family, we decided she got to pick 5 schools, I got to pick 5 schools. And that worked well for her too, because there were really 5 she was interested in. There were 5 I thought would be a good fit for her, and that worked well. Every family's different. I'm not saying there's one right way to do it, but just thinking about this as a parent or as a student, going into this process, you kind of know how you want to handle all of this. Okay, some California considerations. For the California State University system, they have now gone to preference for regional acceptance. So if you live in the San Diego area, for instance, they would prefer to accept you over a student from Northern California. And so what that says to you is that the Southern California schools in particular are more difficult to get into for Northern California students because you're out of area. And this is a change that's happened over the last few years. The 2 exceptions to this are the Cal Polys, because they accept students based solely upon a ranking system based upon GPA and standardized test scores. So that's one thing to know, is that our local campuses, your students would have priority admission to. San Francisco State, and East Bay. That doesn't mean kids aren't getting in elsewhere. It just means the local campuses are now looking at accepting local students preferentially over students from out of area. So that's a little bit different from how it used to be. Also, some campuses have credit unit limitations. And I was a little bit blown away when a friend of mine went to Sonoma State University recently to their admitted student day, and it was communicated that they are limiting students to 12 credits a semester. Students may not know the significance of that. 15 units a semester is what you need to graduate in 4 years. So I was like, not so good. Because, okay, you're going to be in there for at least 5 then. When I called and asked about this, because my student was actually considered for a program that was a specialized program, they only accepted a certain number of kids in this teaching credential program because she wants to be a teacher. They said, yeah, that's a problem. So she may want to take classes at the California community colleges. And I said, well, that could be a problem because they said she will not get math, science, or performing arts at this school. That kind of worries me, okay, financially and personally as a parent, right? So I said, but the classes you say she needs, those course titles are not available at the California community colleges. I said, yeah, that could be a problem. Yeah, it's a problem. It's a big problem. So I wasn't so thrilled with that. So that is one thing to really find out about. One thing I hear about San Jose State, they're limiting students to 14 units a semester. Again, you won't be done in 4 years. Now, if you carry a bunch of AP credit with you, maybe you will. If you're open to taking some classes at the California community colleges in summer, you might be able to. But these are really critical questions to ask when you go to visit these schools. Is, can my student be done in 4 years? And if they hem and haw about it, I'd have some concerns, and I would talk to kids, which is why that visit is really, really important. Because they'll tell you the truth. Yeah, I was really mad. I couldn't get my classes. I've had kids go to some campuses where they'll say, I signed up for 15 units, and they canceled all 5 classes. So I had to then work around that, and I had to get some other classes. So when you go to campus visits, please ask these kids. You're not going to see generally these problems at private universities. You probably won't see this as much at public universities out of state, but I'm talking California. So these are all things to ask. Hopefully this will be ironed out, but as we know, the state budget's in flux, and that is influencing post-secondary education to a great degree in our state. Okay, unstable fees. One of the California state universities can't even tell you what spring fees are going to be because it depends upon the budget, and they say so on their website. So when you think about planning for college and money associated with planning for college, you need to keep that in mind. And this isn't to deter you from Cal State. Cal State is a really good system. I'm just saying you may want to think about going to the community colleges in the summer to get some of those classes. You may want to thinking about taking, especially if math and science are kind of slammed, if you are on track to take honors or AP courses in those areas, if you've already satisfied those requirements while in high school, that can be great. I've had kids go to Cal State, sometimes as sophomores, with all the work they've done at Dublin High. So they don't have these same issues. Okay? And I'm not saying just take these classes just to get rid of the credits. I'm saying it's just something to think about so that you budget accordingly, or just know, I do have some kids who go, I know I'm going to be there for 5 years, I love the campus, that's okay with my family and me, because we've had that discussion. So just being aware of that. Okay, increasingly stringent requirements, that's what I refer to with the University of California. And certainly the California State University system is more difficult to get into. That's why we had to have a wide variety of schools that we're looking at, not just one system or just 2 systems, but a wide variety of schools to look at. Okay, the lottery system for classes, that was what I was talking about. Some schools are going to you can pick 10 credits now in the first 2 weeks, and then a week later you can pick 5 more credits. So some schools, larger universities, are going and doing that. So these are important questions to ask when you go to visit, so you know what you're getting into. Because they're not going to tell you on the website when you apply They tell you that when you go to admitted student day or when you go to the visit. So just educating yourself about what it is that you want to do. And some kids will say, well, that's okay because I love the school. I'm just saying educate yourself so you know, so there are no surprises, and mom and dad are now suddenly paying for 5.5 years of school when they weren't expecting that. Or you're taking on a whole bunch of student loans that you weren't expecting. Just being informed consumers. Very, very important for you. Okay, also, California private schools are generally more expensive than out-of-state private schools, so that's why I'm encouraging kids to look at a wide variety of options and the difficulty changing majors. We already talked about that with the Cal Polys. Okay, Western Undergraduate Exchange serves the western states, and for many kids this is a really great option. Not all schools do this. Some schools restrict it by major. Typically, for instance, University of Oregon is not part of this program, but what this program does is for many campuses it will allow you to pay in-state tuition plus a half, which is a whole lot better than full out-of-state tuition. So for some places this is really, really an affordable option. But for the WUI, that's how you pronounce it, it sounds kind of funny, but for the WUI, one thing you need to know is it can be restricted by major, so engineering and nursing typically are not part of WUI. It can also be restricted by GPA and standardized test score, and not all campuses have it. The other thing you're going to need to ask as you go through your college search is, will you be committing to continuing participating in the WUI program? One thing we discovered is many, many Dublin High grads in the past have gone to Arizona State University because it was affordable, it was part of WUI, they could get their classes, it was awesome, and this year they dropped out of WUI and didn't tell anyone. Oh boy. So, if you're looking at a WUI school, I would ask if they're going to continue to participate. Okay, because we don't, again, want any surprises. A lot of schools, I think what's happening is because of the concern with public California universities, a lot of our kids are looking at going out of state. Because a lot of these schools, for instance, University of Nevada at Reno, UNLV, they have the 4-year graduation guarantee. They will guarantee you will graduate in 4 years assuming you don't change your major. So that's very attractive for a lot of California kids, which is why some of the larger public universities like Oregon State, University of Oregon, I guess ASU now, have dropped doing the WUI because there's so many kids from California applying. Hey, they can get full tuition sometimes, so why not do that? So that's, you just do want to ask this question, is if they're going to continue on. Okay, also out-of-state privates are generally less expensive than in-state in California, and not all privates, as I mentioned before, have merit-based aid. So if you're applying to a very difficult school to get into, don't assume because you have a 4-point something, they're going to give you a lot of money. These are things you need to look on the financial aid website for. Okay, so you're going to apply to in-state and out-of-state. The applications are done in the fall of senior year, and many of the private schools use something called the Common Application, which will save you a whole lot of time because you fill out one application. It's great. And here at Dublin High, we actually have lunchtime workshops that help you with the Cal State, help you with the Cal UC, and help you with a Common Application. And we do this starting in October, and we go all the way through the end of November. So there's plenty of help, and I can honestly tell you too, I help a lot of kids individually. So that's pretty much what my fall is college applications with kids. So there's a lot of help available for that, but what I would like to see is a broad range of schools that students have researched and are reasonable schools for students to get into. And we already talked about the free applications. That can be a great thing. It saved us a lot of money. Okay, so private schools, we like to do those in September. The reason is the Cal State and UC application period doesn't start then. So doing the Common Application or private stuff, that's an awesome time to do it because you're not doing the public stuff. Okay, so let's get those babies done right away. What you want to do is develop a resume of everything you've been involved with during your high school years, including if you've worked, if you've been on sports teams, if you've volunteered, leadership, anything unusual about you. Because what colleges are looking for is to create a class of really interesting people. Again, not just about the GPA, it's about the whole student and what they can bring. Maybe you're a great violinist. Maybe you are captain of the football team. They're just looking to create a class of a great variety of people so that it's not just a generic kind of, that's all it is, right? This is mostly what privates are doing. They're really doing a wide variety of stuff. Okay, Cal State, the application period is October 1st through November 30th. UC is November 1st through November 30th. We would really like it if you were to submit these applications well in advance of the application deadline, because a couple of times their servers have crashed because everyone's doing it on November 29th at 11:50 in the evening. So, and the other thing I'd really like you guys to do is have your school counselor check over your application before you send it. Because oftentimes, although what seems to be fairly obvious, people will put classes in the wrong areas. People will put in things they don't need to put. People will put things in incorrectly, or it can be a problem. So please come see us. We're happy to help. This stuff is really fun for us. And it's really stressful for kids, but it's really fun for us. And I think if you know the application that you sent is correct, it's going to take a whole lot of stress off. The other thing you don't want to do is send in something incorrectly, then come about a week later and go, hey, I think I made a mistake, because then you have to contact every school that you applied to say, I made this mistake, and you're kind of setting a little bit of a perception as you haven't done things with, you're not a detailed kind of person. So have us take a look at it. We deal with applications all the time. We know what to look for, and we can often think of things that maybe you might not. Okay, so I said by November 30th, I really meant 2 weeks earlier. Okay, so it's all about stress reduction. In fall, seniors typically say, no one's going to want me. Well, all of that is dealt with a whole lot better if you've done the research and you're fairly confident you have a pretty good shot of getting into the schools. Okay? So the people who are most stressed are the ones that just start this process at the start of senior year. So let's start that earlier, and then we avoid all of that. Another thing is, in spring, it's like, what if I make the wrong decision? Well, think about it. How awesome is it if you have, like, 10 schools accepted me, I don't know which one to choose. You know, how great is that? Because you're happy with all of them because you've done the research, right? So you can't really go wrong. Okay, so what we did is we had our daughter apply. She got into all of her schools. That was fabulous. Then it came down to the whole financial aid piece, because for me that was big. So we filed our FAFSA early. Theoretically, you can do it the 1st of January. Not really, because you don't even have your W-2s yet. So no, but we filed it probably early February because I knew we'd get our student aid reports by March. And I knew that we would be visiting schools in spring. So we got the student aid reports, and we were able to already figure out, okay, she got this much aid, and this school looks reasonable, this school, they don't give her anything. And so that was really helpful to know. So then we could figure out, well, this is where we want to go visit, and these other ones we're not going to bother. But we already knew that they were all pretty good fits for her. So there was that level of comfort. You want to have a lot of options. It's all about having options. If you've done your research, you're not going to make a mistake about this. Okay, just as you're going to get really tired of me talking about me. But this was, my own story was, and this is what I want you guys to know. I applied to 12 colleges and universities. I got into all of them. Did I ever visit one? No, I didn't. And so what happened was, I went, great. I got into University of Maryland. That's the hardest one to get into, so it must be the best. So I accepted going to Maryland, never having set foot on the campus. I have discovered about myself I'm much more of a small liberal arts person rather than a big public university person. And I got there and I'm like, oh my God, there are 35,000 people here. And this is so not me. And it wasn't a great fit. I will say Maryland gave me a great education. If I were to do it again, I would have put a whole lot more time and a whole lot more thought into the process. and I would have gone to visit the schools I was applying to, or at least had been accepted to get a feel for whether they were really good for me. So that's what I want you to avoid, is just because you get into the hardest doesn't necessarily mean it's the best one for you. Okay? All right, financial aid. In senior year, we send out a form asking you to fill out the Cal Grant Release form so we can send your money, your GPA, to the state so you can get Cal Grant money, ideally. We file FAFSA early so you can get your student aid reports early, so when you go to visit schools that make sense for you financially, you'll already know about how much you're going to pay, and you can talk with the financial aid office if you need to. Okay, some privates require something called the CSS profile. That's an additional service off of College Board. And so private schools who are very expensive oftentimes will ask you to file this document as well. So FAFSA is pretty straightforward. CSS will ask you all kinds of things like, do you own rentals and vacation homes, and they take into account a lot of other financial information that the FAFSA does not. Okay, and by May 1st of senior year, that's when you have to have told the school that you're going to go to or where you're not going to go to, that you're either going or not going, and you have to have your deposits in. So you still have plenty of time. That's why I'm asking students and parents to really file that FAFSA early so they know what the deal is. So if they need to go visit, they can plan that well in advance of May the 1st. You don't want to get down to the deadline and then go, oh my gosh, I'm not really sure where I'm going and now I need to visit these 3 schools. Okay, so this is one student's profile. Okay, what happens when you file the FAFSA is you get what's called an estimated family contribution, and that's done off a federal formula. So what happens is that this estimated family contribution is the same whether you go to public, private, in-state, out-of-state. It's all the same money. And then each school sends you what's called a student aid report. And the student aid report tells you this is the cost of the school. This is your estimated family contribution. This is how we're going to help you bridge that gap. Oftentimes it's student or parent loans. So students, this is a conversation you need to have with your folks about how much loan assumption are they willing to take on, and how much loan assumption are you willing to take on. Because I do have a friend who's now 35 who incurred $60,000 in student loans and is still paying them off at $600 a month. So the loan thing is really big. You don't want to be real excited about the loan thing. It's also better to get subsidized than unsubsidized loans. But every school will tell you. Okay, so you can see there's a great variability just from this one student in terms of how much each scholarship was worth. And this, take a look at, for instance, school number C. Oh my gosh. That's how much aid was offered, and of course bunches of loans, yes, but the overall cost was $51,000. Well, there are other schools here that are way less than that. I'm not saying it should be all about money, but money is a consideration. So then when you get the student aid report and you see how much money different things are going to cost you, that's when you might want to make a decision about where is it really worth it for me to go visit. Because that $51,700 a year school doesn't look to me like that's a real good option. But anyway, so it can be very variable, that's what I'm saying. Especially for some of the smaller, well-known private schools, they might give a lot of merit-based aid. So as a high-performing kid, don't necessarily knock them out or right off the top because of the money. But then when you get your student aid report, that's when you may say, this is just too much money for me. Okay. Okay, community colleges, real briefly, there are several local schools, and people have asked me to kind of cover this a little bit. What I'd say is California community colleges are in much the same situation as the California public universities. They're underfunded. They have a lot more kids who want to go there than they have spots for. So, deadlines, deadlines, deadlines. This is really important for four-year college admission and two-year college admission. If you miss a deadline at this point in time, they're not going to care if you still want to apply. You have to meet the deadline. So turning in stuff late it's gonna really not be good. You're gonna be kind of out of the pool or out of the options of getting the classes. So, meeting deadlines, taking assessments early, arranging for classes early. Last year I was on my way to the Cal State Conference, and it was the opening day of De Anza College across the bay, and they said, yeah, we've got 32,000 students and 3,200 students are registered, but they don't have classes. I can guarantee to you that these students registered late, they didn't take their assessments on time, and therefore, because they didn't take their assessments, they couldn't get their classes. So kids who meet the deadlines generally don't have as much trouble. I keep in touch with some of my kids who go to Las Positas or DVC, and I say, do you have trouble getting classes? They said, no. But interestingly enough, they were also my kids who always met deadlines in high school. Okay, so that's the big thing. You meet the deadline, you're in a much better situation than if you don't. And it can be tough to get classes. So flexibility in your schedule, and also what I'm reading now is sometimes out-of-state community colleges aren't as impacted as the California ones. So if you're thinking maybe about, like, let's say you want to go to University of Oregon, and you don't have money for the 4 years because it's about $38,000 a year, you might want to think about going to a local community college there, getting a feel for the local area, getting to know some people, living in kind of the housing up there, and then you put your preponderance of your money for the last 2 years of school. Okay, so it is a little bit easier for out-of-state community colleges in terms of getting the classes. But I do have kids who've gone to California community colleges and they've saved an awful lot of money, especially if they were going to schools that were very expensive, that they wanted to go to as a transfer student. And for high-performing students, they generally do get out in 2 years because they're not taking the remedial classes. So if you're looking at the California community colleges, I would say follow the college prep pattern of coursework and do well in it. I've got kids absolutely in honors and AP courses who are doing really, really well. And they're not having the mentality of, I'm just going to Las Positas. They're going, I'm going to Las Positas, and by the way, I'm also going to the honors program at Las Positas, and I'm going to transfer to Berkeley. So it's all about attitude. You know, a lot of people don't have money for 4 years of school. A lot of people might have money for 2 years of school. So these are really viable options for a lot of families. But I would say increasingly my community college students are all completing the A through G requirements for college and doing really well. They're not looking at it as like a non-option, okay? Especially if there are financial considerations. And getting into some of the more competitive schools is easier as a transfer student, and that's kind of what some of them are looking at. Okay, students who need remediation, that means they haven't completed A through G, or maybe they've done kind of a marginal job in high school, generally do take more than 2 years. Okay, if you don't score out of Algebra 2, and you're in Algebra 2 is a high school course, it's not a college course. So if you don't challenge yourself in high school, those same classes that you chose not to take in high school, you're going to have to take in college. Only now you're paying for it, and they're considered remedial at that point. So that's why you want to take care of all this stuff in high school when you have the opportunity, and really go ahead and challenge yourself. And they can be impacted, so a lot of the kids might be taking summer school courses, so just know that. If you're going to go to community college, I often say for English 1A, that's the foundational freshman English class. You might want to do that in summer because it might be hard to get it in fall. Be open to looking at alternatives with that. And I think the big thing is statistically students who go directly to a four-year college or university are more likely to graduate. But I think sometimes those statistics are skewed a little bit because there are adult learners who come back, there are kids who haven't completed A through G at the high school level who are going to take longer, and oftentimes get a little bit discouraged if they're in remedial courses. So kids who've completed A through G are statistically more likely to get done in 2 and transfer, and availability of classes at the junior and senior years is a lot easier to get. It's the general ed stuff for freshman and sophomore years that are more difficult. Okay, you can also attend any California community college. I have kids going to Santa Barbara City College. So they're down there and they're having an awesome time. And if you have a good GPA, you can actually share housing with UCSB students because they've got joint housing. So there's some really nice programs that kids can look at if they don't want to stay at the local school and still want to save a little bit of money. So for assessments, they're not uniform among California community colleges, so DVC might have a different assessment than Las Positas. You need to call the different campuses and find out. Don't make an assumption that because one school works one way, that the other school works the same way. They're all independent of each other. And Cal Grant monies do apply to California community colleges as well as four-year schools. Okay, sometimes there's this idea that financial aid doesn't cover you at community college. Absolutely it does. Absolutely. And there are honors programs, and there's a really awesome engineering transfer program at Las Positas, where you start off in multivariable calculus and physics, and it is really high-powered. And I've had kids go to Berkeley and UCLA from that program. So that's about it. Okay, we've just covered a couple of things. Does anyone have any questions?